Okay. I'd like to go ahead and call our meeting to order. We have a really full agenda tonight, and it would be nice if we could push through it. I want to welcome Tom Hauser, who's calling in. Hello, Tom. Okay, you sound a little bit in the rain barrel, but I think, can everybody hear him?
I could, I think. All right.
Okay. So I call the meeting to order at 6:30. And I just wanted to announce that if we have a couple things, or at least one thing to vote on tonight, and because Tom is calling in, we would have to do a roll call vote, which means identifying each person and have their vote tallied individually. Okay. Are there any announcements? Okay. So at this time, then, if there are any members of the public who wish to address the commission regarding items not on the agenda, now is the time to come forward and request recognition.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. I wanted to thank you for all the effort that's gone forward to having a Roseland library. It's one of the best things that's ever happened to us out there, and I'm hoping that you'll keep it open as long as the county is dithering about their property over there. They haven't really been able to get their project together as quickly as they'd like. So if I were you folks, I wouldn't be in a hurry to leave. It's actually a really good thing that you're doing, having the library branch there. And this was witnessed, if you will, by the Together at the Table event that happened last Thursday night. It was quite good. Blackness in America. And there's some of my friends from Roseland who were quite impressed by it occurring. There's a lot of people who have never even talked about the problems we've had here in Santa Rosa and Roseland and Sonoma County for being such a white bread community, if you'll excuse the expression. It's a place that hasn't really had much ethnic diversity, and it's just now beginning to have it in the last few decades. So it's a good conversation to have, and I'm glad that it was able to start there in Roseland, and I'm hoping that we'll get more big events like that there. So in the past, I'd come here and said how I wanted to help with fundraising for the Roseland Library branch. And as you know, the fires that came back in October, which is already 4 months ago, has really slowed up a lot of efforts on different things. But myself and others in the community want to continue that effort to try to bring forward as much money as possible so you can have a Roseland Library branch that's better than the Northwest. I know that Northwest is getting refreshed. We want a new Roseland branch that's even better than they got. So keep that in mind. It's a competitive kind of thing, and we'll be asking those folks with the big money who employ many of the workers that are living over in Roseland to help us on this. And one of the things I'm going to ask for personally is really nice, soft chairs to sit in, because those hardwood chairs you've put in the main Santa Rosa Library branch, excuse my expression, they're butt breakers. I'm an old guy, and it is tough stuff to sit there on those chairs for longer than 15, 20 minutes. You're like, man, what is going on? So someone told me it was because of hygiene concerns and that you'd gotten these chairs to make sure they were easy to clean. But I've been in other places, hospitals, the military, all kinds of places where they've found ways to have softer chairs that they can keep clean. So please, keep that in mind. And as you prepare to refresh the Northwest and then go for that new Roseland Branch Library, give us the softest chairs we could possibly have. And then I won't have to go down to the Central Branch in Santa Rosa except for the annex and the genealogical stuff. Last but not least, there's one other really cool thing in here that I wanted to talk about, and that's the way people are able to get their library cards. And you got a lot of possibilities here. So I think you've really bent over backwards to allow people to get a library card. And thank you for doing that. And I just wanted to say, adding the extra hours on computers was also nice too. So thank you for all the good things you've done.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, we will now adjourn to our closed session, conference with labor negotiators, pursuant to California Code 54957.6. I can't exactly tell you when we'll be back, so hang in there. To order pursuant to California Government Code Section 5.957.6. The commission met with the SEIU MOU contract negotiator team and approved of the team as recommended by the library. That team will have a lead negotiator of Suzanne Silva, and we'll also have Jamie. I know I was going to do Anderson, sorry, Jamie Anderson and Ken Neiman, and also Janet Corey Summer, who is the legal counsel from our newly hired attorney firm. So thank you all for the work that you do for the library. At this time, we would and I should open it up if there's any member of the public who'd like to make any comments on the previous items on the agenda. Now would be the time to do that. All right, so we have no library, or do we have any library advisory boards or friends groups here to make a presentation? Seeing none, we will move on to the special presentations, item 7. And the first one is 7.1, our CPS HR Consulting Director Search Recruitment Schedule, presented by Pam Derby of CPS HR. Thank you and welcome.
Yeah, that's good.
Sorry.
We don't have a written schedule, right? Okay.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I'm trying to work the clicker here. There we go. I don't want to take too much of your time this evening. I know you have a very jam-packed agenda. I have met with the selection committee already, and we've established a work plan for the recruitment, and we came up with several other activities that we're going to do, and so I just wanted to walk you through those tonight and just take a little bit of your time. So we did have our committee kickoff last week, and during that opportunity, we talked about doing a community engagement, being able to get feedback from those that you interact with, what they're looking for in the next library director. And so we've developed an online survey, and I'll let you know what questions we're asking. We talked about all these stakeholder feedback opportunities, and so am open to speak with all of you personally. I will be here all day tomorrow in the History and Genealogy building in the conference room, if anybody has the time to take advantage of that. But I definitely want to speak with all of you if you'd like to talk about what you're looking for in the next library director and have that conversation. And so from all of that feedback, we will be developing a recruitment brochure that's going to be the marketing piece for the recruitment. After we've done all of that, we will have our aggressive outreach and marketing period. That's going to take place from February 15th to about March 19th is when we anticipate closing the recruitment. The ads will appear for those 30 days. We'll be doing a very extensive outreach program, and we'll be doing follow-up contacts to encourage the application of qualified applicants. We will be, yes, Linda, Ms. Garcia.
The survey will be February 15th.
The survey is going to be deployed tomorrow as soon as the commission meeting is over. We just wanted the commissioners to see the questions before we put it out live, before we launched. So the selection committee had already seen them, and I will email you. We have a very definitive work plan that I can email all of you, but I wanted to wait until we met this evening to see if you had any questions about that. We will do a very comprehensive screening interview after March 19th when we've received all the resumes of anyone that meets the minimum qualifications for the position that we've advertised. We will put together a very comprehensive report on all of those individuals, supply all of that material to the selection committee. We are going to be meeting on March 30th. To talk about all of those candidates. We have not decided on specific dates for their first round of candidate interviews, but I believe it's going to be April 4th, between April 4th and April 6th. We may split it up over a couple of days. Certainly, we've talked about whether we do those via Skype. You have Zoom to save on travel expenses for candidates. I anticipate that probably they'll be interviewing about 5 to 6 candidates in that process. They'll be determining your finalists, probably a top 2 or 3, that we would then move to reference and background checks. Actually, we can't do background checks now until a job offer is on the table. That's a new law in California as of January 1. But we would be doing our reference checks. I think we'll be talking about if there'll be any other further assessments of the candidates that they'll be doing. And then we're anticipating that the commission will be interviewing those finalists in person either the week of the 23rd or the 30th of April. And so then hoping to make a job offer and have someone I would anticipate on board early summer. Okay, well, I'm not sure. Yes, okay. So these are the questions that we have decided to deploy for the survey. Please identify the 5 professional characteristics you think are the most important in the next library director, the 5 personal characteristics you think are most important, the 5 projects or priorities that you'd like to see them address in the first year of service. And are there any other particular stakeholders or individuals that you'd suggest we contact in regard to this position, either as potential candidates or referral sources, and or to gain particular insight regarding the position or the Sonoma County Library? This link is being sent out widely. We have a long list, friends, the advisory committees, et cetera. All the rest of the employees. I have sent an invitation already. I spoke with some of the senior management staff already today and gave them that opportunity as well. And so then we will be wrapping this up on the 14th and hopefully have the ideal candidate profile set so that we can start advertising around the 15th or 16th. So I know I rushed through that, but...
Commissioner McKenzie.
That was very short. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
In terms of the survey and who all's going to see it and know about it, and I'm sure will it be on our website? I mean, a link to the...
Yes, there will be a link on your website, on our website, and we're sending it directly via email to an entire list of stakeholders that we've been provided.
So that's what I want to point out. A lot of times people think the word is getting out to the labs and the friends and whoever else, but it never filters down that far, is I don't think we really have a list of, I mean, maybe we do. I don't know what you have, but in order to really get to the Friends, and that what that really probably means is all the board members, the Friends board members, and we probably don't have the individual ones. Anyway, just we need to be really careful if we're really trying to get the input of the Friends and the labs, that the individuals get it or at least know about it, not just like one contact person.
Thank you. And I will certainly send that link to all of you with that information so that you can forward it to those contacts that you have as well. And, you know, we will make sure that we're finding as many email addresses as we can.
So I can help with that. We have our Exchange email database of all the lab members and their personal email addresses, and we can provide that to the consulting firm so that they can easily reach out to the Friends.
They don't reach out to the Friends. I mean, I don't think that would work that way. I think that's a good idea to get each individual lab members, but the Friends are really separate organization.
Right, but we do have, most of our Friends, we have their personal email address contacts in our Exchange or library email database. We do. And so if that's something that you desire, we can make sure that Pamela's firm has access to that and we can get the blast sent out.
I'm not sure what the search committee wants to do, but, you know, we've had a problem before issuing, like with, you know, commission notes and things like that. Just, you know, who actually gets these things and who's expected to pass them on and so forth. So anyway, I just wanted to raise the question. And then my last question is, you're here all day tomorrow at the
Correct.
History and Genealogy. Are you making appointments, or it's kind of like last minute?
Let me give you my phone number. It's 530-434-0163. So if you want to call me in the morning, I'd be happy to schedule time with you tomorrow. And we can
otherwise,
also
just
do
talk to
telephone
you?
calls there after tomorrow. I'd hope to speak with you. I'll email all of you tonight so that you have my contact information.
I think, as I recall, the search committee wants to encourage each commissioner to also reach out to their lab and their friends group to make sure that they're aware of the survey and that they participate to the extent that they can. I do know that there are some friends that don't have email, so that's something that maybe the Friends president knows who those people are and can mail copies of the survey to them. Be a good idea.
We can certainly have hard copies at all of the libraries as well.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say that the committee had hoped, urged, requested, required that all the commissioners be responsible for being sure that the people in their community who might have an input know that the address and the way to fill out the questionnaire, so that we take on part of that responsibility.
Right, and that could include your appointing authority.
Right.
Your city councils or board of supervisors or whomever.
Anything else?
Other comments or questions? Do you have more? Do you have more to say, Pam?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay.
thought you
So
were doing
Pam,
something.
you will be sending an email out to us. I encourage people to get in touch with her, the commissioners to get in touch with her to set up time to talk about their vision of the next director. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Oh, David?
That's not a question for you. I know it's in the minutes someplace, but could you just refresh my memory as to who is on the selection committee?
If I remember. Okay, so I am on the selection committee Tim May, Linda Garcia, Reese Foxen, and Randall Neff. And Suzanne Silva is helping us through this process too. Oh, right. And we also have former Commissioner Hillary Smith is a member of the committee. Okay. All right. So that takes us to item 7.2, the Northwest Refresh. Dave Tasheva.
He is ill.
Okay, tonight we're going to present our refresh project. I can hold that later. Anyway, we have a PowerPoint for you guys. And probably the best thing that I've done since taking on this project was hire Facilities by Design to help us with the interior design and the management of the project. And I'm going to turn this over to Ashley or Paula.
All right.
This is Paula Stabler, the owner of the company, and this is Ashley White. She's one of her designers. And they've made this PowerPoint for us to show to you tonight.
Is this just clicking from screen to screen? Okay. We worked with Nate Bisbee also, who's the architect on the job. So we've kind of got slides from his presentation as well as our own. This is kind of the Northwest redesign overview. He's kind of reconsolidated where the stacks are and the collections to free up space in the center of the room for more of the reading tables and computer kiosks. We've also worked on the redesign of the workroom for the staff, as well as the children's library, keeping the mural that is currently there as the main focus of the space still. That's where they do a lot of the activities at the library, so keeping that a central point in the design. You'll notice that the entry has completely changed as well, so there's not a jog to get into the space. And then we worked on a custom service desk as well. This was kind of the initial palette for the project that Nate put together, and the blues and the greens you'll see are the stack end panels that we've also got on the board here. And then trying to keep the other finishes kind of neutral and cohesive with the rest of the space, not too flashy. And then this is just the two-dimensional layout of the whole space. This, again, is the service desk that we've customized. We've worked with a manufacturer in the Bay Area to work on customizing this towards staff needs. Each of the actual staff locations has a height-adjustable desk. So with the fluctuating staff, the different heights, it can work for anybody and, for years to come.
And the children's desk is built into it now?
Yeah, the children's desk, is a built-in space as well. That's going to be on the far left side if you're looking at it. And then this work counter behind just provides some space to sort books as well as some hidden shelving behind that where people can stand up and it's a more flexible space. The entry is going to have some kind of screen here on the right-hand side as you walk in where the bathrooms are. It's going to block that and create kind of a main entryway. Again, the two blues are going to be the blues that you're going to see at the stack end panels.
One of the nice things about that entry, right, it's going to be perforated like that, so you can, for safety, you can still see people walking back there to go to the restrooms, but it adds kind of a visual barrier.
Yeah. And then the main reading room, here's kind of we've worked with the same people that are customizing the service desk to customize all of the computer tables. And so they're going to have the same finishes and have a cohesive look throughout. They're going to have built-in power and data into the top, as well as hinged panels for easy access for all the IT and cable management to go through, and you won't be able to see or access any of that unless you're accessing it from an IT standpoint. There's also added data and electrical throughout the space, and that's allowed for more plugins, like people come in, plug their laptop as well as their phones and stuff. And we do have some of the tables that you see on the left side of the screen here that will provide outlets for people. These are a couple of the lounge pieces that we've selected for the space, as well as the finishes. You'll see those repeated on the board up here. A couple of the lounge sectional pieces, as well as some single chairs if people are just reading a book. And then by the large windows at the entry, we have more of what we're calling a cafe space, which has a counter height table and stools. It's set up to have data and electrical in the future, but at this point we haven't added any at that location right now, but kind of playing up with the natural light and giving people a look onto the front. In the children's area, we've really tried to do some fun finishes. What you'll see here is there's going to be a green stack end panel in the children's area, and this fun print, which you'll see on the board here, has kind of a hidden animal print figure in it. We've also, again, with playing off the mural, we've got 3 different kids' chairs, 3 different colors, which are reflected on this board, as well as a cutout of 3 different dinosaurs that we're using to add a little bit of whimsy into the space. And then the break room and restroom are all being updated. There's going to be an enlarged ADA accessible bathroom, and then the break room and cabinetry and everything will be refinished. The workroom will accommodate up to 5 employees at a time. 2 of them are set up more for regular staff that will have a little bit more storage, and these are all height adjustable desks as well. And then the branch manager's office is set up with a lot of storage and seating for guests. That's it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm looking on page 9, the refresh, the overall plan. I see a women's restroom, but I don't see a men's.
If we go back to the overall floor plan.
Yes.
Let me pull that up. Now, Dave.
That's a unisex bathroom?
Okay.
So
Could you speak into the mic, please?
that's a unisex bathroom. And currently what we have there is 2 very narrow bathrooms that aren't up to ADA code. And so Nate's idea to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and meet our ADA requirements and have a nice roomy bathroom. We're going to do it somewhat like what happened in Runner Park, where there are multiple gender bathrooms. So, but only 1 person at a time can go. Over here, the men's room does just cut off. So
It does what?
it's there. And I did invite Nate Bisbee here to present his overall vision of this library to you.
Okay.
And if we could hold off on the questions until he's done.
Okay.
Maybe, and then yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, Nate Bisbee. Thanks for having me.
Tom,
Oh, okay.
Are you with us? Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I'm here. I was just getting a drink because I was coughing.
Okay.
There is a men's bathroom then somewhere. That was the point I had.
Yes. Yeah. So I just wanted to add, it's been a pleasure to work with you all and to work with our team. We have a great team for the project, and we've been working really hard to get the most with the least and really maximize the plan here and the reorganization of the Northwest branch. And a few things we've done, we've really focused on the front door. The front door had kind of a vestibule. We've taken that out. So when you enter the library, there's a new wider entry, twice the width of the existing, and a much more open feel. We've also consolidated the circ desk. So rather than 3 points of contact with staff, there's a really clear, coherent, simple way for staff to greet customers and patrons of the library. This also freed up some more floor space. So we wanted to get more seating, more gracious seating inside the library. At the same time, we've replaced stacks without diminishing the overall stack or the overall collection size, which is also important to us. So we've kind of made some modest adjustments to the plan in order to make it a little more efficient and really make this more than just a carpet and paint upgrade by, some simple reorganization of the interior. So in the staff areas have been updated. I think Ashley talked about those. A unisex bathroom rather than 2 small non-compliant restrooms for staff. The public restrooms are as is. Those are larger restrooms, men's and women's separate. We have reorganized the entry a little bit to make the restrooms more hospitable, observable, let's say, from the front desk. The way the library was before, there was a wall between the circ desk and the restroom entries, and there wasn't really good observation, so we think the eyes-on approach will be a little safer at the restrooms. So that's been another goal of the project. That's about it. If there's any questions, thank you.
So I see Barbara's hand.
Yes, it looks nice and interesting and different and modern. And I had just a few comments. I think the term cafe seats is kind of confusing. When I first saw that, I looked for the cafe. And does that imply high stools to sit on?
They're a counter height stool, so they're not a full bar height. It's a counter height. So at that location, there's just 3 stools.
And so the little table and chairs there, so on the edge there, it says counter seating, and then there's cafe seats.
Yeah.
Could you please use the mic?
The round tables behind that with the 2 seats each, those are both regular height tables, standard.
Oh, good. Because I was just wondering if people really like to sit at those big high ones. My contention is they don't really like to. Maybe kids do, but that's not in the kids area.
Yeah, it's the only other area that we've done some elevated seating. Everything else is a standard height. So it's just to give a little bit of a variety in the seating.
And that's just those 3 seats?
Just those 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm still unclear about the bathrooms. I only see the one. The one was women's and now it's uni. And how people can see them better. Or,
Does this pointer work?
The pointer should work. According to the map, there's 3.
Doesn't work on the screen. Doesn't work on the screen. So the bathrooms are in the bottom of the plan. They're just cut off on the other view that you're seeing.
Right there.
and who can see them? I mean, how are those visible by
two
staff?
bathrooms?
They're visible from the circ desk, the hallway. They're not looking in the restrooms, but they can see
Right,
the
but-
hallway now. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So just to clarify, the staff have a unisex bathroom.
Yes.
But there are 2 public bathrooms.
Yes.
Well, where's the staff bathroom?
Oh, okay.
Right there.
It's
Okay. And then my other comment on terms, I'm so glad you saved the mural. It's such a unique feature of that library. But I was wondering about the Kimball Bloom chairs, the very light color upholstery, which just seem like they're going to be instantly dirty.
Those chairs, excuse me, those chairs are actually in these upholsteries. The actual seat upholstery is a vinyl, so it's wipe cleanable.
Great.
And really durable. And then we've just got this darker upholstery at the back. Those images were just samples of what the chairs look like.
Great.
And these are the actual fabrics we're using throughout the space.
And so they're stain-free.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Director Gray.
I just want to say thank you to this team, to Nate, to Paula and Ashley and Dave, and Kate Keaton, our branch manager, is here tonight. There was a lot of thinking and creativity into this project, and I think they've all done a fantastic job, and I want to commend them all, and I can't wait for it to be done and to see it. So I hope they had fun doing it as well. Thanks.
Commissioner Foxen?
Looks really, really good, and it looks a heck of a lot more efficient than others I've seen. My one question to you, Dave, is who's going to be the project manager on this?
Well, I'd say that I'm the project manager on this as far as all the final decisions I'm making, so.
And you're going to be handling the whole work process too?
Right. We are, facilities will be fully staffed in like less than a month, and we will handle all the construction.
Okay, just curious.
And they're handling all the furnishing and the carpeting and scheduling of that.
Okay.
So having the two projects as a headquarters and this going on, we've really been able to manage all these projects as like one big project.
And don't forget the technology.
And IT has been vital. And I have to say that that kind of came into this with it already kind of, the ball was rolling for a little while, and then it stalled because of internal problems. But then, really, I had like three things that I was wanting out of Nate, and one was that to use the mural somehow and incorporate that. And I've been involved with 1 refresh and 2 remodels, and each time we lost like 10% of the collection. And so I told him, I said, can't we do something where we don't lose collection? Because I hear from the staff when, we lost 10%. My aunt is a retired branch manager at Guerneville, and she said, I can't believe that, Sebastopol lost 10% of their collection. And so it was just, I asked her, I said, is there any way we can keep the same amount of shelves? I think we increased them.
They're almost the same.
Almost identical. And then the last thing was, can we do something with those bathrooms in the staff room?
Yeah, well, thank you. I think you probably know some of my concerns because I was up in Cloverdale.
Right.
And so I was just wanted to make sure it was going to go a little better than the issues we had there. So thank you.
Same company who did Cloverdale?
No.
Whole different team. Nate was in on Cloverdale a little bit with the early on in the design, but then the county kind of took that over and managed that. And I don't think they're used to doing libraries. All right.
I just have a quick question on the mural. The mural looks great. So this is an actual mural that's going to be installed? Is that?
It's there. It's there already.
Oh, it's already there. Okay.
Right,
Sorry,
right.
I'm embarrassed. Okay, preserving.
Right.
It's a great mural. Somebody's dog.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We're very excited. What's the ETA?
Mid-May.
Okay.
Mid-May, just in time for summer reading. And I don't know if they really emphasize this one point. So the whole children's area is mobile. They can move all that furniture out and have a big area for, this was really, really important to Kate and her staff to be able to widen that space out. Because right now they have their programs right down the center of the aisle, and they move the big, huge tables that takes the entire staff to move. And so then, now all this stuff is on wheels or very light, mobile, and they have this big area now to have programs. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It looks lovely.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Okay. We're going to skip down to item 8, the commission and liaison reports, because, excuse me, we were quicker on our closed session than anticipated. So we have a couple of presentations to go back to when the presenters arrive. So we'll start with item 8.1. Let me first back up a second and make sure that, Tom, if you have anything you wanted to add to the Northwest refresh, that you have an opportunity to do that.
No, I don't have anything to add to the comments that have been made.
Okay, thank you. And are there any members of the public who wanted to make any comments? Seeing none, we'll go down to the commissioner reports, and if we could start with Commissioner Neff, that would be great.
I have nothing to report from Windsor.
All right, and maybe as we go down the line, you could speak your name, and instead of having me introduce you, so we'll go to the next commissioner.
This is Commissioner Foxen, and I have nothing to report at this time either.
This is Commissioner Heavenridge, and I have a slideshow on the Galapagos I'd like to show all of you right now. No, but I have nothing to report.
Commissioner Ebright, nothing to report.
Oh dear. I'm Commissioner McKenzie. I have a few things. I attended the Together at the Table at Rohnert Park. It was on climate change. It was fantastic. The excellent presenters. Well done, well organized. Kudos to Angelina and all other people involved in that. My one comment is, with the theme is Together at the Table, it really wasn't a situation where competing voices, we were all sitting around the table. It was really a presentation of experts taking one side that, yes, there is climate change. And I don't know about the other ones. I want to go to other presentations. I want to hear the rest of them. And as far as I know, we don't have one consolidated list of, and I know the fires affected this, but a list of where the branches are and what the dates are that we're passing out. I don't think we have a consolidated list. But anyway, it was a fantastic, very well done. I also attended Friends of the Library meeting, and I talked about Together at the Table because it was, I think, the day before, and everyone was really excited, and they said, oh, where's the list? And we want to see it, and we want to go, and then we didn't have something like that. I also attended the Roseland Community Celebration and visited the Roseland branch. Had a nice conversation with the librarian there. I visited Lumicon, and thank you, Tim May, for making us go or encouraging the commissioners to go. It was really a fantastic event and really amazing. Organized event with huge participation. I'm sure Tim will talk more about it. I attended, I don't know even what this note means. I went to the adult literacy celebration, and I'm so glad we all have this tonight, and I'm sure somebody else is going to talk about it, but what was really cool, the authors were there, and we got to get autographs in their own book, and it was really neat. And I have something here, member night. I worked member night for the Friends of the Library last Wednesday, and we had another really strong turnout. Lots of community members joining Friends of the Library in Rohnert Park, Cotati. So,
Commissioner Whistler, I attended the Friends meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they reported that they'd done a great job as far as their book sale, the recent book sale. They had brought in more money than they had for a few different times. The Sebastopol Lab meets later this week, so I will be attending that, and I will pass this on to the next commissioner.
Commissioner Garcia, I went to the Santa Rosa Lab and am always amazed about everything that happens and all the programs and the dedication. I did mention to them at that time the survey for the recruitment of the library director, and as soon as I know that it's up and running, I will email them. But we did talk about it, and we talked about the recruitment process, but also they are also looking for new youth members and members in general. Thank you.
I'm Commissioner May from Petaluma. The report I've gotten on Lumicon is somewhere above 3,000 people visited. It was quite amazing. I got there after Commissioner McKenzie had been there. It's always fun to see, and it's really quite, the press has been wonderful about it. Also, several of us did go to see the new headquarters in its not quite finished phase. And my initial impression is it's bigger than I thought. But it looks like things are going to be very interesting down there, and I'm looking forward to what we find there.
I'm Carla Howell, and I have nothing to report.
Commissioner Hauser, do you have a report?
Thomas Hauser, I have nothing to report.
All right, thank you. So I see that we have a presenter, and I think that this is item 7.3, Bartell Associates CalPERS report.
A couple months ago, or maybe it was along last budget time, a year ago, that there was really a lot of concern about CalPERS and all the changes that have been going on, and what does that really mean, and what does it mean for our future contribution rate and everything. At that point in time, the Commission decided to contract with Bartell Associates so they could do an analysis of past things that went on with CalPERS, let you know some of the changes and what that really means, the changes mean to the library, and then looking forward. We have a representative from Bartell Associates here tonight, Doug Pryor. He's going to present the analysis to you, which begins on page 21 of your commission packet. Yes, this is Doug Pryor of Bartell Associates. He helps clear things up quite a bit. He came and presented to the Finance Committee a couple weeks ago. So here he is. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Pryor.
Good evening. So you have our kind of full report in your packet there, and what I have on the screen is a PowerPoint of that report. What I'd like to do, unless you have questions or you want to do this as we go along, is just kind of run through the kind of key points, not run through every slide here, kind of run through kind of the highlights here, and by all means stop me as I go along. So this slide shows historical returns on the CalPERS Trust over a 20-plus year period. As you can see, and probably well aware, there were kind of two significant downturns, the .com 2001, 2002, -7 followed by a -6.1% return, and then the 09 -24% return, which actually was followed a -5.1% return. So you have a couple periods there with significant drops. You can see the kind of the volatility. You can't kind of see it through this slide, but you can see a little more in the next slide is kind of what this all averages out to over the long term. And so these bars show what the returns have been over from 5-year, 10-year on up to 30-year periods. The fact is that when you look at this fairly long term, they've performed pretty well. That's an 8.2% return if you look at a 30-year period there. Now these numbers are a little skewed in a way because you also have the inflation component here, and over 30 years it's much higher than it is over the 5 to 10-year period. So real rates of returns aren't as favorable when you look back over the long term. But nonetheless, if you look 30 years, they have a pretty good return. The 10-year average there, 4.3, is pretty significant. That takes into account that 08-09 downturn, and that's really, took a significant hit to the system that we're still trying to recover from. We have a brief background just on the benefits. The library has the classic 2.5 at 55 formula. Average earnings are based on final highest year. And then you have your PEPRA people as mandated by state law, effective in 2013. and I probably didn't set all this up to kind of talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of general things about how we got here. There's investment returns we're looking at, right, with kind of long-term returns are pretty good, but over the last 10 years, 5 years, not so great. You have then also on this slide, which is, I think, a huge driver in terms of how we got to where we are today, which was way back in 2003. There was a lot of difficulty with agencies and contribution rates fluctuating quite a bit, in part due to the investment volatility. And CalPERS put in these smoothing techniques. And the fact is that these methods did a great job for smoothing out rates, but not such a great job for paying down liabilities. So we have that last section there talking about negative amortization. Think of this unfunded liability, and you kind of see what the library's unfunded liability is a few slides later. But if you think of the unfunded liabilities like credit card or a mortgage, and if you pay less than interest, you're actually getting further and further behind. If you don't pay interest on your credit card, the balance is growing. Well, you have the same thing with the unfunded liability on a pension plan. If you're not paying interest on the unfunded liability, you're not paying principal, certainly, and you're getting a little further behind. And the fact is that what's happened in the system is a lot of agencies across the state have been paying less than interest on the unfunded liability in general. It's a little more complicated than that because of CalPERS using actuarial value of assets, and there's a projection period. There's a little more detail to it, but if you look kind of at recent reports, what you see in a lot of agencies is CalPERS calculate unfunded liability, and yet the payment that they're having agencies make on that liability doesn't cover interest. And so that's exacerbating the situation. And also has to do with, if you look, as we'll see a few slides later, if you look at where your contribution rates have been in the past, they've escalated quite a bit, and it might seem, oh, well, we should be at a point where, it should stabilize. The problem is that even with the increases that they've put in place over the last 5 years, you're still typically not paying interest on the unfunded liability, so they still will need to increase the rates from where you are today. This one, I'm going to skip a few of these to try to get to, we'll kind of come back to some numbers from this later on. So I talked about what happened back in 2003 and the smoothing methods that the actuaries put into place back then. Then back with the 2013 valuation, they kind of decided, maybe that's not working so well. Maybe really there's too much smoothing, and so they put in these ramp-up methods that essentially what's happening at this point is, if you look at your unfunded liability, anytime there's a big change, for example, an asset loss or a change in the discount rate, they don't just amortize that over a fixed period. They amortize it over a ramp-up over 5 years. So if you look at, to take an example here, towards the middle of this slide, the discount rate change. In the June 30, 2016 valuation, they lowered the discount rate to 7.375%. That increased the unfunded liability. Rather than amortizing that over a fixed period, they did this ramp up. So that 16 valuation first impacts your 18-19 contributions. And that is, essentially you can think of it as kind of, you make 1/5 of the payment in the first year, 2/5 the second year, and you get up to a full payment by 2022-23, and then you pay it off over the next 20 years. And so they, when they went to drop the discount rate to 7, as you can see with that schedule, they have these layers, and each time they drop the discount rate a little bit, they then say, okay, you're going to pay this off over a schedule and ramp it up each time. So you have sort of these trends, upward escalating trends on your contribution rates that you'll see coming in later. We have a number of different items that have been changed over the years. Certainly the most important and the most visible at this point is the discount rate change, which they're dropping to 7% by the June 30 of 2018 valuation. As you see there, that doesn't fully impact rates until 2024-25. In addition to that, they've kind of looked at the portfolio and decided, I think the comparison would be a 401k plan. A 20-year-old or 30-year-old would typically want to invest very differently than a 60-year-old or 70-year-old would, right? And CalPERS is no longer the 20 or 30-year-old, right? There are a significant amount of cash requirements coming out of the plan to pay for retiree benefits. And so they need to move to more kind of conservative portfolio. Doing that immediately would drop the discount rate. I mean, contribution rates would skyrocket. And so they came up with this plan, what's called risk mitigation. The concept really is simply they're going to wait for years where there are really good returns, and in those years, they're going to reduce the risk in the portfolio and reduce the discount rate. I can give you more detail on that, but that's the basic concept. And we've done a lot of modeling on likely returns in the future, and based on our modeling, we think that will mean that the 7% discount rate that they're going to use in the 18 valuation will slowly ramp down to 6% over about a 20-year period. It's not a fixed schedule, right? It's not they're going to go. They're not going to go from 7 to 7.95 to 7. I'm sorry, from 7 to 6.95 to 6.9 and on down. They're going to wait, and so until they get these years with good returns. So it's kind of unknown, but based on where the returns are in the future, they're going to ramp down the discount rate. So because it's not a fixed schedule, what we have here is kind of what I was describing. This is where we think the discount rates will go into the future. So what you have for the first three, for the 16, 17, and 18 valuations, discount rate will decline from 7.38 down to 7%. And then after that, it's going to depend on what the actual returns are in the portfolio. So what this is illustrating is the thick green line there is where we expect the discount rates to be. So as I said, we think it will get agencies to about a 6% discount rate in 20 years, which is out there on the right side. We have the lines shooting up and down are meant to capture what the likely ranges are of the discount rates. I won't go into detail unless you have questions on that, but we'll get into that concept a little later when we're looking at future contribution rates. This has, real briefly, I'll just touch on this. This has historical information from the CalPERS valuations. 152 on the right-hand side as of the most recent valuation, June 30th, 16, 152 active employees. What you see there is more than that, 169 former employees that are now collecting benefits. So that's fairly typical that you get that number of former retirees. As you'll see later, the kind of impact that has on your liability in terms of having that many former employees that are collecting the benefit. I'm going to skip over this. This is historical counts, participant counts. If we move forward here to slide 11, the unfunded liability. So again, the most recent CalPERS valuations as of June 30th, 16, they are intending to get the June 30th, 17 reports out, I think, in July of this year. But at this point, this is the most recent report available. What you see there in the June 30th, 16 column is active AAL as accrued liability is about 20.5 million, retiree liability about 39.8. You have another group of former employees that are vested but haven't collected benefits, started to receive benefits yet, 1.8 million. So total liability of about $62 million. Assets, $48 million. Unfunded liability, about $14.1 million. This is measured based on the discount rate CalPERS used in this valuation, which is 7.375%. Unfortunately, I think that's, I think if you had to pick a rate to measure this liability, it would probably be 7%, setting aside the risk mitigation, that if they're just going to invest today the way they are going forward, I think probably a more appropriate discount rate would be 7%. So this number would be a little higher based on their reports. They estimate it to be about $16.6 million in unfunded liability if you measured this on a 7% discount rate. I'll skip over this. This has changes since the last valuation. I'll just point out real briefly, to underscore the, the idea that this is really driven by investment returns. What you see there just changes from the 15 valuation to the 16 valuation. The unfunded liability increased by $3.1 million. It increased by $3.4 million because the investment return was less than expected. So there are some other things going on, certainly, but what you typically see is the lion's share of the changes between two valuations is from the investment return. In this case, 15-16 actually was not a great year. It was a 0.6% return. Since that was below the, at the time, 7.5% assumed return, there's a loss on the unfunded liability. This has historical funded status. We have a couple of slides on this. I think they both sort of illustrate the same issue, which is that, as I mentioned earlier, that downturn in 2001, 2002, you can kind of see late 90s, the plan, just as many plans in the state were overfunded, assets exceeded liabilities. I'm sorry, this chart here is showing assets divided by accrued liability, so over 100% is well funded. And what you see here is well over 100% in the late 90s. Then the asset losses in 01, 02, and it drops down to, by about 2003, around 90 or less percent. Looks like 88% or so. And started to recover a little bit, and then you have that second kind of hit to the assets, finishing with the 08-09 return in negative 24%. Then it drops to 64% funded. And then, made some improvement, but if you look back from, say, 2012 to 2018, and, a lot of this is it's not specific to the library. It's, almost every agency that we work with across the state has a similar graph here. And with a lot of this is that if you look at this chart and go back to, say, 2012, 76% funded, we're projecting into 2018, it would be 77% funded, right? So there's just not much progress that has been made in the last 5 to 10 years. And that kind of motivated CalPERS to change those methods back with the 2013 valuation. This is similar slide, just breaking out the components in the funded status. This is the green bar is the assets, and the red bar is the actual accrued liability. Moving forward, this has historical contribution rates. As you can see, as I mentioned, in the late 90s, the plan over 100% funded. And what you see there is the contribution rates as a percent of payroll are the darker green line with the square markers. So those were 0, no contributions required for a number of years back through 2002, 2003. And then as the funded status took a hit, the contributions kind of have jumped up and have continued to rise. For next year, contribution rate is about 22% of payroll. The green line is the normal cost rate, which is a component of the total contribution. Probably the more important number there is the solid green with the square marker, the total contribution rate. If I move forward to, I'll talk about the assumption. If I could jump forward to slide 19. So this is now getting into the section where we were, up till now, I talked a little bit about the history, a lot about the historical results from the CalPERS valuations. This is now getting into projections that we've put together based on the CalPERS report. So if you look at this chart, so this is contribution rates. The thick green line is where we expect the contribution rates to go out into the future. So 20.3% of payroll today, escalating to 30.1, and then ultimately by 28-29, about 28.9% of payroll. So the thick green line in there is where we expect the contribution rates to be. What you have shooting up and down there are building in the volatility in the asset. So what this chart is saying is in 28-29, we expect your rate to be 28.9% of payroll. Half the time you'll be somewhere between the lower end, 22.6% of payroll, and the higher, 36.1% of payroll. So, statistically it's a 25th and 75th percentile, but I think you could think of this as just kind of a good and bad scenario. We'll come back to the percentages, I guess, a little bit, just because this chart also is saying, look, based on investment returns, we think it's a 25% likelihood that your rates will be above 36% of payroll 10 years from now. Okay, and that's obviously not a that would have some pretty poor returns going forward, but the model is saying, a quarter of the time you could be that high. Flip side to that is, 75% of the time you'll probably be at 22.6% or higher, or a quarter of the time you'll be at 22.6% of payroll or below. But at any rate, you can see kind of the trend of where we think you're going. This builds in, I don't know if you want me to get into all the assumptions, but this has risk mitigation built in. So it has built into it an assumption that the discount rate will change going into the future. It has built in the fact that you're expected to hire PEPRA employees in the future with lower costs. It also has built in an expectation that asset returns over the next 10 years will be kind of lower than they will be long term. I think most of the investment advisors are anticipating lower returns over a 10-year period. So this is a 10-plus year projection. This slide then shows it longer term, so you can see very long term. The rates are expected to come down as the unfunded liability is paid off. But expectation is that if you look at this for the current year at 20.3% of payroll, almost by 41, 42, 43, somewhere out there, it's not until that point in time that you're expected to be below 20% of payroll. So expectation is sustained kind of high rates for quite a while. Maybe I'll just, if you go to slide 22, this, setting aside the asset volatility, this is just where we expect the rates, the contributions to go as dollar amounts, okay? And here in this chart, we've broken up the contribution by normal cost payment, which is benefits accruing for active employees, and then that payment on the unfunded liability, the UAL payment. Normal cost there is orange, UAL payment is red. The total of the two gets you the total contribution, the green line. So this also is fairly typical, almost approximately a doubling of the dollar amounts that are expected to be contributed over this period. CalPERS has built in on their payments a 3% escalator. And so, if I do back up to this previous slide, what you see here is you look at the top line, the contribution rates, they're a little bit flatter here. If you look at the green line on the top, it goes from 20.3% of payroll to 28.9% of payroll. But when you look at that in dollar amounts, because they're assuming the payroll will grow by 3% annually, this has a much steeper slope, a much bigger increase in the total contributions. So if we have a lot of other slides here. The one item I did want to kind of touch on if I have time, or if it's okay to, let me move forward to the 115 Trust. So, you can, in looking at the historical, not the historical contributions, but looking at where we project the contributions to go, I think that as most agencies are in the same position of, the fact is it's very unlikely that returns are going to be high enough that you're going to not have to put more money in down the road, right? There's just very little chance that returns are going to be that high that you're going to be able to stay at your, 22% of payroll contribution rate out into the future. And so that being the case, then, the question is, if you're going to give money to CalPERS, have to give more money to CalPERS at some point, what's the best way to do that? And to the extent you can, would it be a good thing to put money in earlier? And one of the instruments that's been developed to address this is the 115 Trust. As this slide says, PARS has really set up the lion's share of these. There are over 100 of them set up. I think PARS alone has over 100 set up themselves, and then a few with PFM and Keenan. But what a 115 Trust is it's money that's set aside in a trust that can only be used to make payments either to CalPERS or to reimburse an agency for the contributions to CalPERS. So it's money that can only be used towards your pension obligations. But the money doesn't go to CalPERS. So if I could back up one step, if you look at the contribution projections, every time you look at those, what you see is you see them ramping up over time, right, in all these illustrations. Well, one of the issues with giving extra money to CalPERS is it's very difficult for them not to just, it's very difficult for them to level out your contributions, okay? If you kind of do the default, if you had money and gave them extra money, what they're going to really do is just shift that curve down. And so if you're starting at 22% of payroll and you gave them enough to drop it to 20, you're just going to start ramping back up all over again. It's kind of the default with CalPERS, just at the way that they have structured their payments. So a 115 Trust would be an option to give you some flexibility to level those out. It also gives you a little bit of flexibility to use it kind of as a rainy day fund, so that if you set money aside to extent returns are not as good as hoped in the future, you could use that 115 Trust money to transfer to CalPERS in years where your rates are being increased. So maybe I'll just go to one example here. If you move to this slide 35, just for the concept. In this illustration, so the green line is where we expect the contribution rates to go for over a 10-year period. And what the orange line represents is where your contributions could go with the 115 Trust. And it's there's a lot of different ways to do this. We just show this as an illustration. The illustration here is assuming a $500,000 initial contribution, and then 2% goes into the trust for each of the first 2 years. And then what you're doing is you're targeting that 27.5% of payroll as a contribution. So under this kind of a contribution stream, you're able to move from the green over to the orange. And the idea would be that you put the initial money for the first couple of years in the 115 Trust, and then to the extent your rates go up by more than you expect, you can transfer money over to the CalPERS. To the extent they don't, you stay at 27.5. So it gives you the ability to go from this, ramp up on your contributions where you know you're going to just have to continue to put more and more money in to kind of leveling it out. Okay. The initial parameters here were just that, just kind of a stab at an illustration of how it might work, but there's obviously a lot of different ways a lot of different scenarios that could get you to a more level contribution payout. So that's including the 115 trust. That's maybe I ran through that a little quick. I don't know, but I don't know if there's any questions on any of this.
Is there any downside to doing a 115 trust?
Well, so it can only be used for pensions, right? So if you put $500,000 in today and 2 years from now you thought you wanted that money for something else, you can't take it out of the 115 trust, okay? You can, as a lot of agencies have pointed out, you can kind of in a roundabout way get to that money, because if you put in the 115 trust and you needed a few $100,000 a few years from now, you could use a few $100,000 from the 115 trust to pay your CalPERS contribution. Okay, so it's kind of tied up just for pensions, but it has a lot more flexibility than it does for CalPERS. So in terms of drawbacks, for your financial reporting, it won't count as a pension asset. It would be on the library's balance sheet, but it wouldn't count towards the unfunded liability for pensions. That's maybe or maybe is not a big deal. The other thing is that, I think long-term returns with the 115 trust are probably going to be lower than CalPERS. I mean, I'm not an investment advisor, but I mean, you look at those long-term, very early slide, right? You look at over 30 years, they've really done fairly well, right? I mean, they really have. They're close to 8% in the long term, over that long term. I think for the 115 trust, you're probably going to have higher expenses for administration, investment expenses, and whatnot. So long term, your return will probably be lower. So I think that's also a drawback to the 115 trust. So that's a couple of the. I don't remember if I'm forgetting any others, but that's a few that certainly come to mind as drawbacks to the 115 trust.
Any comments or questions from any of the commissioners? Commissioner Hauser, do you have any question?
No comments. I heard it already at the Finance Committee.
Okay. All right. Did you have something?
So that was an interesting report. Are we doing any action on that, or is it just for our information? Or
it's information.
It's just information.
Well, the Finance Committee wanted to make sure that we had this kind of long-term projection, and we did hear the report at our Finance Committee meeting, and I think this was just kind of an education session for the whole commission, try to digest all this because it's pretty significant. I want to thank you because it was very complete and very helpful and shows us what the long-term scenario looks like. And then we are yet to figure this out and talk about it some more at our budget workshop for sure, and then talk about the long term. But this is a really great opportunity for anybody who really doesn't understand CalPERS or has questions about it to ask our expert here.
Do we not know what we don't know?
But I just want to say, so you're giving us some options here, and so I will rely on the Finance Committee to give some
And
suggestions.
staff.
Yeah, so thank you.
I said and staff.
I have a question. So the 115 trust, so if we put that same amount of money to paying down the liability to CalPERS, is that not possible?
Yeah, it's basically an option to giving more money to CalPERS is to put it into the 115 trust. Was that the question?
Right, it is. But we can, it kind of makes sense given the long-term return from CalPERS to put the money, at least on the surface, without further closer discussion with the whole commission during the budget workshop, it seems like that would be a strategy too, to instead of putting money into a trust that may not have good returns, may cost more money.
Yeah, I think in getting to the end, I didn't set up that, one option would be giving money to CalPERS, right? You're probably going to have a higher return. You also, as I said, you're going to be, back on that. You look at the green line there, right? You're going to be back on that line just shifted down. So you're going to be ramping back up again, right? If we do end up with a major market downturn, I shouldn't say it, but right, if it were to happen and your rates jump and your rates start ramping steeper than this, right, a 115 trust would give you the ability to kind of, dampen that blow and get through alleviate maybe some of the pain in that. So it gives you a little more flexibility is the bottom line, I think, with the 115 trust.
My question is, are you aware of what the trend is throughout the state of public agencies meeting this obligation? Are they going 115 or?
There's a lot. I mean, I mentioned the 100 agencies that set up the 115 trust. We know that those numbers from PARS and from PFM and working with them. We don't know how many agencies have started putting money in. Right, so a lot of agencies have set them up thinking, well, this is a good possibility, but maybe have not sent any money in yet. So a lot are looking at that. I think, a lot of agencies, I think there's a little bit mixed bag. I think probably more doing the 115 trust than CalPERS, but some agencies that have done a little bit of both. They've decided they have this initial money and they just decide, well, we're going to give half to CalPERS and half to 115 trust to try to maybe get the best of both worlds or, kind of get some of the advantages to both approaches.
Any other comments or questions? All right, well, thank you very much. Having a second go-around of this, I think I understand it a little better. But I think we have a lot to figure out.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the next item, but are there any comments from the public? Do you want to add anything, Ken, or want to introduce the next person?
Something real quickly before I introduce the next speakers. This has been a really good report. I think it helped me understand CalPERS a lot better, and I hope it helped you guys. I will be including in the budget workshop 10-year projections using these rates for the CalPERS. So it'll give you an idea of what that does to our whole budget as those things increase up. So we'll be using that. And you're familiar with the trust vehicle because we have that with the OPEB also. It's a little bit different, but pretty much the same. It doesn't go into the actuarial numbers that CalPERS would do if you set it there, where the OPEB trust does, the balance in there does go into the actuarial numbers. That's probably the biggest difference between the two.
Yeah. So this money would still stay on our books, like it's there for us to utilize.
The OPEB trust is not on our books. Right.
All right. Yeah, I I think it's been very helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So that takes us to items 7.4, the 2016-17 audit.
Yeah, it's a numbers night, so I'm sure you all enjoy that.
I love math.
Kellen Gilbert and Brett Bradford for Pisani and Brinker are here to give a brief presentation on the 16-17 audit. It's in draft form right now. Any changes or suggestions that you have, this is your chance to ask questions, but then any changes or suggestions you have may or may not be put into the final, which will be brought to you at a future commission meeting to just formally accept the final audit. So I'll turn it over to Kellen and Brett, and you have it starting on page is at
42.
Page 42 in your commission packet.
Hi, good evening, welcome.
Good evening. How are you doing tonight?
Okay.
What? Oh, sure. I'm sorry. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. Oh, is that? Are you making fun of numbers? Well, I just want to say that we're excited to be here and honored to be presenting again the audit. So, as Ken introduced us, this is Brett Bradford. He's the audit partner. I'm Kellen Gilbert. I'm the audit manager. Ray Pounds is the concurring partner, and the rest of the engagement staff is Kayla Martinez and Nate Salinas, who are not here tonight. So we like to just start with this slide to kind of remind everybody of what the roles and responsibilities are related to the audit. Management, and Ken is responsible for drafting the audit and the information within the audit. Our job as the auditors is to audit that information and to give you our opinion on the accuracy of the audit. For the audit, we consider a number of different items. We call it our risk-based approach. We look at inherent risk within the financial statements, which really boils down to how difficult is that account or that transaction to account for. Is it inherently easy to understand, or is it complex in nature? That's one of the big items that we consider for the audit, which will then help dictate our risk assessment, which leads to the procedures that we perform to then audit those balances. Once we've performed our risk assessment, we do a test of year-end balances, we send confirmations, we review the disclosures, those type of procedures once we've set kind of a risk assessment level for the different sections of the audit. Items that we consider, the authoritative literature, the AICPA and the GASB. We look at internal controls, the experience of the accounting staff, whether there's been heavy turnover or a new accounting system, anything that might cause additional difficulties with the accounting. We look at the inherent susceptibility of the account balances to error, again, based off of the complexity or the volume. Accounts that have significant amounts of transactions could inherently be more risky or susceptible to an error. We also look at external factors. Specifically with Measure Y, we're looking at the economy, the macroeconomics, how Sonoma County is doing as a whole. That can also play into other items such as donations or contributions. As everybody knows, is when the economy is doing better, people tend to be a little bit more generous. We also look at the regulatory environment, so if there's any new compliance requirements that might affect the library, or in this case, Measure Y, which we will talk about in a couple slides. So here's kind of a broad range of what we looked at for the audit and a relative effort spent. And forgive me if I used this joke last year, but everybody likes to point out that this doesn't add up to 100%. And what good are the accountants if you can't even get this to tie? This is just a rough idea. We look at a whole lot of other different factors other than this, but this is just a broad range of the basics. So cash and investments, That's a very important balance, but it's relatively easy to audit. We look at confirmations in bank statements and bank reconciliations, so it's a pretty standard procedure to audit that. So it's only 10%, even though it's a large number on the financial statements and is obviously very important to everybody. Revenue recognitions and accounts receivable, that's a big chunk of the library audit. We want to make sure that everything's being picked up in the right period and being accounted for appropriately. Financial statement presentation and disclosure, that's also very, very important. We want to make sure that those financial statements are free of any sort of management bias in the disclosures, basically saying, is there anything here where we feel that management might be able to have judgment over, or that there's anything within the underlying notes that management could I'm trying to think of a good word, but anywhere where they could affect the presentation. We want to make sure that those notes are without bias, excuse me, thank you. We look at accounts payable and other liabilities. Again, the main issue here is we want to make sure that these are complete, that all the expenses from the future period are sucked into the current period if appropriate. We looked at the fund balance and the net position to make sure that that's being calculated appropriately as far as restrictions or board designations go. And we looked at the Measure Y compliance, which was new for this year, mainly related to making sure that the revenue and the receivable was booked correctly. The Board of Equalization collects the revenue on your behalf a couple months and submits that to you a couple months after the fact. So we want to make sure that that accounting was properly done. And then looking at the specific compliance, making sure that the expenditures were in accordance with the measure. So to cut to the chase and to get to the good news, our audit is resulting in unqualified opinion, which means that the financial statements are stated fairly, without bias, and they're in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles in all material respects. And we've added a slide, this next slide, to kind of give you a comparison to last year, just a refresher. Last year we had a qualified opinion due to a scope limitation, which basically says that your financial statements were materially accurate with everything except for this one item, which we weren't quite able to get a full view on, and so we had to have a scope limitation. And excuse me, and that was related to the capital assets, basically a lack of tracking and reconciling the capital assets from the previous period, and that also resulted in a material weakness in internal controls. So again, that was for the 2016 audit, and for the 2017 audit, as I previously noted, we have an unqualified opinion. We do not have a scope limitation, and that's because a physical inventory of the capital assets was performed and that the capital asset subsidiary ledger was properly reconciled. So good news for 2017, everything was back on track, and again, we had an unqualified opinion. So during the 2017 audit, we did not encounter any fraud, illegal acts, or significant and unusual transactions. And these are very important for us to communicate to you. If there was any of these type of transactions, it would raise to a level where we would need to communicate that to you immediately and prior to this presentation. But we want to make sure that we present this to you so that you guys can do your job as the governing commission. And so these are part of the required communications to those charged with governance as we stay. We wanted to, again, let you know that there was no material weaknesses or that we did not identify any material weaknesses. There were no alternate accounting treatments, so that would be a situation where there was maybe two different perspectives, and we discussed it with management of which way they wanted to go. That was not the case this year. We didn't have anything of that nature. And again, we didn't have any other items that would rise to the level of being needed to communicate to the board. So no major issues to report. Again, just the other remaining required communications, there was no disagreements with management concerning the scope or the application of accounting principles with any significant matters. And we will also be sending a letter to basically reiterate this same information from the presentation. Questions?
Commissioner McKenzie.
I don't have a question. I wanted to make a couple of comments. One, kudos to Ken, our CFO, and his finance department for, obviously doing a really good job, which is reflected in this audit. Thank you. When we heard about this in the Finance Committee earlier this month, one thing to point out about your firm is that you had a lot of smoke damage from the fires and actually had to relocate, and this report is only just a few weeks later than we would have expected. So I really thank you for staying on track. And I think it's a great report. There were just some things to learn about last year because you were new to us last year, and everything went just swimmingly this second time around. So I think it's really impressive on the library's part and Ken's part, as well as the job that you did for us. And so I want to appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yes, and I think that we all second and third Commissioner McKenzie's remarks. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ken, for doing all of these things to get a sparkling report. A lot of work. Any other comments or questions? All right.
Great.
Thank
you
very
again.
much.
Very appreciate the pleasure and honor to be here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, any comments from the members of the public? Okay, seeing none, we will continue on with, we did finish the commissioner reports. Now we turn to 8.2, the committee and liaison reports, and 8.2.1, the director evaluation. There is no report, so 8.2.2 to...
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Hauser.
Yes, I'm going to have to leave now. I've lost my ability to concentrate anymore, so I'm meeting at this time.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and we all hope that you feel better.
Okay, eventually I will.
So 8.2.2 is the Finance Committee report. Commissioner McKenzie.
Thank you. It's in here. I can't find it.
Page 94.
I saw it once when I read it. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I won't belabor any of these points. We had a very comprehensive, in-depth Finance Committee meeting because we were trying to tackle the initial information from Mr. Pryor of Bartell. Then we had a good report from our auditors. Again, went over everything. It turned out, very positively, and we're appreciative of that. And then toward the end of the meeting, Ken handed us some information to start thinking about for the 18-19 budget, and we'll be revisiting that at our next Finance Committee meeting. And because those two, obviously lengthy reports and presentations we had, we carried over all other items to the next meeting. We've had to change the next two meetings. Normally we meet the third Monday of every month. We'll be meeting Monday, February 12th at 3, and then in March we'll be meeting March the 12th, and we're also changing the time. So we meet March the 12th at 2. We may actually be able to meet down in the new headquarters office in Rohnert Park, but that's to be determined once the move happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And so now we go to 8.2.3, the Advocacy Committee report. Commissioner Foxen.
We met on Monday, January 8th, about an hour before the commission meeting. Tim May was present. Angelina was there, the community engagement coordinator, and Tracy was there. Paul Heavenridge called in, and Linda Garcia was absent. Tracy and Angelina reported that Coffee with the Director was being changed and moved to the evenings so that commissioners and lab members and other people could actually participate in the copy of the directives, hopefully creating a better conversation to go on. We revisited some of the concerns regarding the Library Foundation, and Scott Alonso asked if he could meet with Helena, and he turned out was bringing some extra board members, so she asked if Tracy and I could go with her when we made the meeting. And it opened the conversation between the two groups, between the library and the foundation, which was something that has been sorely needed. And what has come out of that is Helena has decided to form an ad hoc committee around this issue to help increase or establish a pattern for communication between the foundation and the library. We also approved a survey to the labs that we'd like some feedback on. If anybody has any comments, we would like it. We wanted to get the labs engaged kind of to find out what they would want to do if they did an all-day lab workshop, what they would want to gain from that, et cetera, who they would want to have put it together. A copy of the survey is in here. We also asked what days over the next year that they might want to make a report to the commission, because this is something that everybody has talked about. And we also asked them what kind of partnerships they formed within their community. So we would like to have Jane or Janice. Janice? God, I'll get it right yet. Just bear with me. Put this on SurveyMonkey and send it out to all the lab members to see if we can get some solid response back. So unless Helena said to put it before the commission and I guess get it by consent, if somebody has a question or a comment. Barbara?
Okay, Helena. I wanted to get to, I think the survey is a great idea. I wanted to get to kind of this fundamental question about how labs see themselves. And, you know, rather than, I think all of these questions are good questions. I would like to have a question that's something about what do you see as your primary responsibility of your lab? What are your primary accomplishments? Something along those lines.
Okay.
Because we still haven't kind of gotten to the essence of what I still see as a problem with the labs.
Okay. Yeah, I'll add that in there.
Thank you.
Any others? Okay. So if I add that in, would it be okay to go ahead and have Jane or Janice send it out, SurveyMonkey style?
It looks to be okay, yeah.
Thumbs up for that?
Thumbs up.
All righty. Good. Okay. The DACA resolution, we're going to have that ready for March. We're going to have another meeting on February 26th because our time has been so constricted lately. We're going to have a second meeting on February 26th after the budget meeting. So be ready for that. And finally, the SCA 3 that I have been talking about has been put on hold until after the June 2018 elections because a number of Democrats have been asked to step down for a number of, well, I should say mainly one reason. Anyway, they've been asked to step down, and it has reduced the Democratic supermajority, so they don't have that anymore. Republican have typically voted against anything that's going to increase taxes or put anything financially on the public, so it's been a party line vote. So as I say, they've set aside till June of 2018. We see what happens then. There are a couple of other bills that I just learned about actually this morning that are being put forth, and I'll have more information on those at the next meeting. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So that takes us to 8.2.4, the Foundation Liaison. Commissioner Garcia.
The Foundation will meet on the 21st.
Okay, thank you. And 8.2.5, Ad hoc Standard Operating Procedures. I think Commissioner Foxen is still working. It's in progress, and you think it's very close to coming back to the commission?
I'm at the point of putting the things together
Okay.
now.
Great.
The
Thank you
writing
very
is
much for your work on that.
along the way.
All right. 8.2.6 Measure Y Oversight Committee. Okay. When is the next meeting?
It's on March 15th.
March 15th.
And the place is to be determined. Could be Rohnert Park or the Central Boardroom.
Okay. And we've already had our report from the ad hoc Director Search Committee with the presentation earlier in the agenda. That takes us to item 10, the consent calendar. Are there any members of the commission or the public that request any items to be removed from the consent calendar? We have the 10.1, the regular meeting minutes from January 8th, 2018. Okay, seeing no request or hearing no request to remove that, this item is so moved by the commission. We have Commissioner Hauser is absent now that he's signed off from the meeting. So these are approved, yeah. Okay. And that takes us to item 11, discussion items. 11.1, Interim Director Gray's report.
Okay, just a few things to add. So the move to headquarters is happening next week on the 14th and 15th. So all of the staff will be moving on those. The movers will come and move all of the stuff into headquarters. The division managers are working with their staff on alternate locations to work on those 2 days. It's exciting. This project has been in the making for 10 months, and it's finally happening that we're moving, so it's very exciting. I want to thank all of the staff. Dave has been leading the project there and at Northwest at the same time. Vicki's been doing tons of technology infrastructure at headquarters. Her and her team have been filled with getting that infrastructure in place there. As you see from the reports, everyone is super busy right now. I want to acknowledge the division management team. Ken's been working with all the division managers, the branch managers on pulling the budget together, and Jaylene's putting together the presentation for the meeting in 2 weeks on the budget workshop. So we're excited to present that to the commission. And HR's been working with all the branch managers on the recruitments for all the branch staff. So they've been very busy doing that, putting together a draft for our new performance management. Jamie and her staff have been, if you've been in the basement lately and see all of the boxes coming in of all of the items, and then everyone's busy packing as well. One of the fun events that I want to commend Kathy DeWeese was the literacy event a couple Saturdays ago. She oversees our literacy department in addition to the whole children's services. So that's a whole job in itself, and she does a great job along with the literacy staff. And I know some of the commissioners were there, and it was great to see the writers and the tutors, and that was a really fun event. So I just want to thank the staff throughout the system. When I go to lab meetings and friends meetings, I go early or stay late to talk to the staff, and they're excited to tell me different projects they're working on, and everyone's just doing such a marvelous job throughout our whole county. And I want to commend the staff that they're doing a fantastic job everywhere. And that's it.
Okay, any comments or questions for Director Gray? Commissioner Ebright.
Excuse me. I just have one comment, and that as I read through the entire report, one of the things that struck me was that the organization continually is a learning organization, from individuals attending seminars and webinars and interacting with colleagues around the state and locally, and then also the level of training that is provided to library staff. And I think that shows up in things like the audit report that we just had, for example. So I think we're seeing real results, and I applaud you all for being learners and continually learning more and more about how to be better and better and better to serve our patrons. So thank you.
I second that, and I have been in a position, management position, when we moved buildings. I know what a complete nightmare it is, and I applaud everyone involved, Tracy and all of your staff and everybody who's managing to keep things going at the same time to plan to move and then to move. It's a tremendous undertaking, and so thank you all. I second that. I had one comment on this fantastic letter on page 112. I loved that. Flash back to how important, how this person, this librarian changed somebody's life. And I loved seeing the handwriting. Anyway, that was really neat. Thank you for including that. And then lastly, I just had a tiny question. I was wondering what the Springs Community Alliance is. I've never heard of them.
Are you referring to my...
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The Springs Community Alliance. So Commissioner Whistler and I met with, it's a group that reached out to myself and Commissioner Whistler in Boys Hot Springs. Okay. They're interested in having library services in their area, so we met with them.
Thank you.
And we do have a MOVE meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. The move to headquarters. So you were mentioning the move, and we're all getting up bright and early to meet about the move and the logistics.
Okay, well, we'll try to wrap this up. I can take a hint. So that takes us, if there are no further questions about the about Director Gray's report, then are there any comments or questions about the monthly activities report 11.2.1? There are so many activities. But if nobody has comments or questions, I just want to, again, as always, thank everybody for all the hard work that they do. And I do constantly tell people, if you read nothing else about the commission meeting, check out the written management activities report. So 11.2.2, the monthly financial report. Any comments or questions about that? Did you want to share anything with us?
Just, unless there's any questions, I'll just share one thing. As you can see on page 119, we received in December a little over $10 million in tax revenue, property tax revenue. So that has come in. I got notice that we may be, usually we receive a second payment in April and then they true everything up in June. We may be receiving another payment in either January or early February because they collected, everybody was prepaying their property taxes and they collected a lot of money. I think that has something to do with the new...
We can't quite hear you.
Can you hear? Is it on? Okay. Evidently a lot of people prepaid their property taxes, and I think that was for personal income taxes. It may, I can't remember, I think it's still deductible in 2017, where in future years it may not be deductible, so that's why they prepaid them. And so we'll be getting more money. Not any more total money, just we'll be getting it earlier.
Okay, that's good to point that out. Thank you very much.
All right.
Any questions, comments?
I appreciate the line on the fund balance.
There you go.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Great.
Okay, so that takes us to item 12.1, 6.1, approve the circulation policy. Is there a motion that wants to be made before we?
I so move.
And I do have a second.
Second.
Okay, any comments? And thank you very much. You took into account, I think, every commissioner's comment and suggestion. So I think I appreciate it very much, and it looks very good. Any other comments or questions? Or?
I would just like to second that. I really appreciate that our comments were all spelled out and responded to, and I really, really appreciated that.
All right. We have a motion for the commission. All in favor? Aye.
Can we say aye since he's offline?
He's offline, so I think we
Aye.
can. Yeah. Opposed? And abstentions? Okay, that's a unanimous for all people present. Thank you very much. And there are no action items by resolution or lab appointments. And so what items do you suggest we include in the commission notes? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Excuse me.
I move that we appoint the members to the Petaluma Lab.
I second it.
Okay, and that is Carol King and Emily Roeder.
Right.
Okay, with terms ending June 30th, 2022. And you seconded it, Commissioner Garcia? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, sorry about that. So agenda, so commission notes items, the circulation policy.
The refresh for Central.
Okay. The up and coming move to HQ again.
Yeah.
Positive audit report.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Positive audit report.
Mm-hmm. And our first report on the CalPERS. Okay. So are there agenda items for future commission meetings? I'm sure they'll come about.
How are we going to address the letter from Rohnert Park? Is that a future agenda?
We will have to have a separate discussion
Okay,
about that.
great.
Yeah. So, I just want to remind everybody that our budget workshop will be held at the Rohnert Park City Council. So that is February 22nd, 6th, sorry.
May I also double check, just, I've been trying to find it online. What is our April commission meeting date?
April commission meeting?
Is on the 2nd, it's not later? Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and our next meeting will be from 9 to 3, as I mentioned, in Rohnert Park, on Monday, February 26th. And so with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 9:08.